liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
Today, we're connecting the dots on something that's been building for years and just hit a new peak. 3 nations, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. One former colonizer, France. And the domino effect that started back in 2023 and is still falling. Niger went first back in August of 2023, right after their military takeover. Niger's government severed diplomatic ties with France entirely, expelled the French ambassador, tore up military agreements, shut the door on them. Mali's relationship with Paris has been deteriorating even longer than that. French troops were pushed out and defense agreements ended back in 2022. Following Mali's own coups, and tensions have stayed high ever since. And then, most recently and most decisively, Burkina Faso. On June 26th of this year, 2026, Burkina Faso's government went on national television and made it official. Full diplomatic relations with France severed, effective that day. That was a shock. That was a shock to the Western world, to France, to the United States. An utter and complete shock. They were caught off guard. How dare these Africans incorporate such a thing without consulting us first? That's how bad the shock was. That's how bad it was. Their statement didn't mince words, though, in Burkina Faso. They accused France of, quote, neo-colonial ambitions and said Paris has persistently acted against Burkina Faso's interests. And that is in regard to the allegations that France sponsors monetarily, logistically, and in terms of weaponry, jihadists or so-called terrorists that they were supposed to have been fighting against when they were stationed in the Sahel. Now, how France took that, I can't speak to that, but this is what Burkina Faso is saying. 3 countries, 3 different timelines, one unmistakable pattern. And Burkina Faso, under Captain Ibrahim Traore, has been the one pushing hardest and moving fastest through every single stage of this. Now, military expulsion, gold nationalization, and now the clean diplomatic break that Burkina Faso has initiated, again, has left France and the West stunned. Stunned, all right? This is the AES doing what the AES was built to do, all right? Standing as a unified front, a genuine thorn in the side of France, and by extension, Western influence in West Africa. This is something, y'all. This is big. But you won't see this. You won't hear this on national TV, on institutional television throughout the United States, France, or the West. This is something they want to keep from the public eye. But the news is getting out there. They're being exposed. The IMF, the World Bank, all of them are being exposed. And because you have to acknowledge that the media is a construct of those in power, it's hard sometimes to get good, validated, concrete news, you know. It's hard to find out what's really happening in the world because those who run everything controls the media. And this is something I don't think that the AES actually worries about, but they're mindful of it. This is something they're mindful of. And so what they've been doing since they've taken control or has started to exercise sovereignty in their countries for their people, they've decided to make their own news. And I think that one of the best ways to get the news is to get it from the horse's mouth. All right. That's a given. All right. Anybody should understand that. Now, it's not just diplomacy, it's money too. This is what we have to understand about this whole get out. Colonization is based upon one thing, everybody. Capitalization. Capitalization is the engine that drives, that controls, that runs, that establishes dominance. But capitalization is only possible through colonialization, being countries being colonized by those with the power, so to speak. Now you break that, you break the system. And this is what we see in full effect in the AES, the system being dismantled. And this has come as a shock to, again, not just France, but the West, the EU, and the United States. This is the problem as far as they're concerned. As far as they're concerned. So yeah, the AES is also moving to exit from the CFA franc. Now that is, in and of itself, something that could very well prompt France to want to enact a military action or reaction, retaliation even, against the AES, because now they're trying to sever monetary ties. Again, capitalism, they're trying to cut it off at the root. Not at the trunk, not at the branches, but at the root of it. They're trying to extract it and do away with it. The CFA franc. Now, if that happens, not only would France feel that, the IMF will feel it, World Bank will feel it, most Europeans will feel it. Most of them will feel it. But anyway, the French controlled currency system that's kept economic leverage over 14 African nations since colonial times, all right? They've held this control over 14 African nations who are supposed to be independent and sovereign, but they can't do anything that they would like to do for their country and the people of the country unless they get a thumbs up from France and the IMF or the World Bank. That's not sovereignty. That's not sovereignty. That's not independence. And these Africans are beginning to understand that. Well, maybe they always have, but now they're bold enough to buck back against it. And this is where we say, or this is how we describe France being shocked. They never thought they would have the heart to buck against a system that's been in place for decades upon decades. But they are. But they are. So analysts are calling this potentially the biggest blow yet, because you can survive losing an embassy, all right? It's a lot harder to survive losing your grip on someone's entire economy. So in other words, it's harder to survive, man, if you no longer have your hands in the pockets of other people, robbing them. If you don't have your hands in their pockets, you can't extract what's in it or what's in them. This is what they're saying. Now, here's where this connects to something bigger than West Africa. In February of this year, at the Munich Security Conference, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stood in front of European leaders and told them this directly: we are part of one civilization, Western civilization. He called for what he learned, or what he termed, a new Western century. What is he asking for? A new form of world dominance, new world order, a new empire, a new plan or an idea, blueprint of colonization. What is he saying? What is he saying? What is Marco Rubio actually saying? He said, we are part of one civilization. Western civilization. He called for what he termed a new Western century. He got a standing ovation from those European leaders. I should note, he had a standing ovation. And independent analysis of that speech described it as an open call to revive the old colonial order, the exact system the Sahel is walking away from in real time. Marco Rubio, though, in 2026 said, we can't let them do that. We cannot allow this. We've been running this for hundreds of years. You know, okay, so what is a new day, a new age? That doesn't matter. We are the dominant factor. We are Western civilization, the greatest civilization in all mankind history, which is an exaggeration, but hey, you know, it depends on how you look at it, right? This is what he said. We have the receipt. We have the receipt. So hold tight because I want you to see this. He said this. He said so much more, but what I want you guys to hear is astonishing on the face of it. He's calling for the United States and the West to link up once again and run the world how they see fit in terms of their interests, their security, their standard of living, their way of living. This is what he did. This is what he did. And, you know, to be honest, that's scary, right? Anyway, an independent analysis of that speech described it as an open call to revive the old colonial order, the exact system the Sahel is walking away from in real time. Okay, so look at what's actually happening on the world stage right now. Okay, look at what is actually taking place, the shifts that are actually happening, these movements that are being made on the continent of Africa, starting from the West. West Africa is more prominent in terms of them standing up and saying, okay, sovereignty is just the word unless you actually enact it or exercise and utilize what it means. And that's what they're doing. This is what's changing the landscape. This is what's changing the ideology or the acceptance of colonialism. They decided to change the whole face of it. And America and the West are starting to take note. They say, oh shit, they're getting out of hand now. We can't have that. Okay? While Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso are cutting the cords of French colonial control, one embassy, one military base, one currency peg at a time. The United States top diplomat is standing in Europe trying to rally the old imperial guard, the old imperial powers, trying to rally them back together. Trying, hey guys, y'all don't remember? For hundreds of years, we ran all these people. What are we doing? Are we choosing not to act by force if necessary to take back what we took? That's Marco Rubio, a Cuban. A Cuban. That in and of itself is something. Who were his parents? So yeah, you know, these are this in this regard. This is like it's not two. This isn't two separate stories, people. Let's get that straight. This is one story told from two different sides of the same fight. We have Africa walking towards sovereignty and independence in the realest sense. If you really think about it, they've got rid of diplomacy with their colonizers. They done got rid of their military, and now they're getting rid of their economic system. This is sovereignty at work. You have to acknowledge that. And as a result, the West is trying to walk backward into empire. They're trying to walk backward into empire. In other words, they want to digress, regress, fall back into what was in a manner or in a means to control the resources, the power, and the people of foreign lands. That's what this boils down to. That's what this boils down to. So let's see how this plays out, right? We're going to see how this plays out. And in fact, like I said, I got a couple of receipts I want to share with you guys. One is significant in that it actually speaks to how others, especially on the continent of the motherland, see this playing out. And I want to give a shout out to African Reloaded, and this is their property, and I appreciate the use of it. Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso just set a deadline for the end of the CFA franc in Africa. That's huge. That's huge. And I need you to understand why, because Omar Gaddafi had proposed the same thing. He said, hey, you know what? We're under the boot of Europeans, of Westerners. We have the American dollar, and some of you have the CFA franc. And it is preventing us from expanding, from growing, from being sovereign and independent from other powers. So I have a proposal. Let's start our own. Let's create our own currency and do away with the American dollar and the CFA franc. That was a plan he shouldn't have spoken out loud, because it was his ending. It was his undoing. We all know what happened to Omar Gaddafi. You know. Now here this is. Let's get a bar of this, people.
If France believes losing its grip on the Sahel was its greatest defeat, it may need to prepare for something even bigger, because the battle is no longer about military bases.
I'll read this. Foreign troops or diplomatic influence. It is now about money. Last month, more than 300 delegates entered the conference hall in Bamako, there to discuss election or military alliances. They were there to discuss the future of a currency that had survived long after colonial rule officially ended, the CFA franc. Created in 1945, CFA franc remains one of the most powerful symbols of France's influence in Africa. But the meaning in Bamako is the expiration date on just days earlier. Another major announcement had been made in Longhi, Sierra Leone. West African presidents and prime ministers gathered and renewed their promise to launch the long-awaited eco-currency in 2027. That means West Africa could soon be facing competitive currency projects. Two different timelines and two very different visions of the continent's financial issues. Anyway, the AES on the other and ECOWAS on the other. So this thing is going quite fast for me. But anyway, what it's boiled down to is, and I see, just looking at it on the face of it, I want to say I see the hand of the West in there in one respect. So let's say, for instance, France, the IMF, World Bank, the West see that the CFA franc is on the way out the door. So what they're doing is scrambling, trying to create a new currency. But in order for that new currency to take place, they need African countries to get on board. So to compete with that, they're going into other countries in the West that France has ties with, who were former colonial countries. And they're saying to those in power, supposedly, this is what we're going to do, and we need you on board. And they are doing it, I think, to compete with what the AES and others are planning in terms of separating themselves totally from U.S. currency as well as the CFA franc. So I don't know how this thing is going to play out, but I do know that we have three major countries in the Sahel, in the west of Africa, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, who are exemplary in terms of how to go about exercising sovereignty and independence, and not just in terms of cutting diplomatic ties or military agreements, but in terms of economics, or economically speaking, having their own currency to be at the forefront of whatever business they conduct, whoever they conduct it with. So now we have ECOWAS, though. And ECOWAS, most of us should know, and if you don't, you should. They are puppets. ECOWAS is the puppet of France and the West. You know, they've done no good to African countries on the continent. Most of what they do, it is done to satisfy its masters. So it could stand the reason that what ECOWAS is planning to introduce as a new monetary unit could be very well, or it could be backed very well by France. Don't put it past them, okay? Don't put it past them. Okay, the ECOWAS stay okay with me because, okay, so there's that. It was announced in Sierra Leone, what is already becoming reality, and what may still be nothing more than another political promise. Welcome back, all right? And here's truth to power. Uh-oh. 1 minute, everybody. What actually happened in Bamako. July 22nd, 2026, the doors of the police in Bamako opened and more than 300 delegates walked inside. They included trade unions, farmers, students, activists, and community leaders from Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mauritania. All right, the People's Forum, a 2-day conference held July 22nd and 23rd. But this was not a government summit. There were no presidents signing agreements and no finance ministers announcing new policies. This was a gathering of ordinary citizens, workers, organizers, and movement leaders from across the region. And the food inside the hall was anything but calm. They discussed debt. More specifically, they described as obvious debt, money borrowed under previous governments, often under conditions ordinary Africans never approved or benefited from. That's the truth. Now, again, this is the CFA franc in full effect, as well as the IMF and the World Bank. We're mentioning the CFA because in that region of West Africa, 14 countries have to use the CFA franc in order to do business. All right? In order to do business. Now, here's the cold part about the CFA franc and how it's attached to those 14 countries in West Africa. All that money goes to France. France told them or tells them, we'll hold the money for you. It's in safekeeping. But those 14 countries in West Africa can't go and extract that money anytime they want to or need to. That's France's decision to allow them or decide whether or not they can spend their own money. And this has been going on for decades. For decades. And so finally they're waking up. They're saying, okay, you know what, enough of this bull crap. All right, that foreign corporations continue to control valuable African resources while many local communities receive very little in return. And that was just part of the problem. See, now the communities, in terms of what they got as a result of, let's say, the extraction of natural resources being exported back to France for them to refine it, do what they do to it, make the top dollar on it, turn around, send it back to Africa, them same countries they got it from, and sell it back to them at a higher price. We have to understand that none of that money reached the people. The money that came back, that filtered back into those 14 countries in West Africa, more than not, or allegedly, went into the pockets of the puppet presidents and government. But when you talk about corruption, there's a lot of corruption. From Nigeria on, there's corruption on the continent. That's not to say that Africa, the continent, is the most corrupt place on the planet. That's not true. Not by a long shot. When you talk about corruption, you talk about the West, you talk about US, you talk about the UK, and you most certainly talk about Ukraine being the most corrupt countries on the planet. But that was the get out. They would take the resources and refine them there, produce them there, turn around after they've done all this processing to the materials, and sell it back to the countries that it came from at a higher price. And as a result, those in power, these puppet governments, they would take the money and line their pockets. The people saw very little of it. Not only that, but the infrastructure suffered as a result of it. The infrastructure remained dirt, roads, dilapidated buildings, hospitals, universities not worthy, of the people, that, live in this country or that is a part of this country. They suffered. They suffered, add to the equation, mining companies out of France and other European nations would go in and devastate the ecosystem, the landscape, and poison and pollute it. No cleanup, nothing in plan for cleanup or, leaving the area like they found it or improving it as a result of them digging it out. None of that occurred. None of that occurred. Let me get to this piece with Marco Rubio because I think it's significant. I think this is very significant. And I'll give it to you right quick. This is Marco Rubio. And he's at the Munich Security Conference 2026. Listen. Mm, 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 mm. Okay. That's what they're talking about. That's what they're on. Their people, their rule, their dominance, their empire for the sake of their race, their civilization, their children. They want to reincorporate empires, uh, start up again colonization, and not have to worry about what they're doing to attain or accomplish any of this. Don't worry about that, is what Marco Rubio said. They have no shame about going about this thing in a certain way to where, hey man, if it's war that we got to bring to them to get what we need, what we want, so be it. Don't be taken aback by that. Don't have no shame of that. Like you shouldn't have shame about what happened before our time. Our ancestors did what they did. So what? So what? Don't be ashamed of that. Embrace that. We need you to embrace that so that we can do what we need to do now. That was our ancestors. What are we going to do that will match that or be even greater than that? This is what they're pushing. This is what they're pushing. So when people talk the talk they talk with very little understanding and comprehension of what they're supporting, this is what you get. This is the rhetoric, because they listen too, they watch. So the people aren't as intelligent or informed as they think they are. They don't really know our plans, our plots. Machination is in full effect. But if we could continue to deceive them, distract them, lead them astray, while we do these things that on the face of it are morally wrong, they wouldn't be the wiser. This is what Marco Rubio was saying to the West. This is what's in effect, and it's coming from the West. War, the improvisation, the force, the forcing down your throat of technologies that are not beneficial to you. The suspension of the so-called Constitution, a document, in fact, that doesn't support everybody. It was written for white people. This is what we're not mindful of, and this is what we need to get abreast of. In order to be able to combat what's happening, what's taking place in this world, we have to be knowledgeable of it. We have to be informed. Inform yourselves of the fact that they are attempting to reinstitute colonization, imperialism, world dominance, whether you like it or not. They're joining together. They're telling all Europeans, the West, let's join together to take over this world and let's run it the way we see fit. While at the same time, they're telling nations of color, we're allies, we're good, we're friends, we got you. That double standard, that lie, you know. That's what this is. Let us know what you think about that. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let the art of political discourse know exactly where you stand with this piece right here. Also, while you're at that, please like, share, follow, and comment, like I just mentioned. But subscribing would be something we'd appreciate very much, because we do appreciate your participation and viewership. Hit that like and share button, all right? And subscribe. Let us know what you think about this piece. Is America and the West in the process of recolonizing the world? What is this war in Iran for? Why did they go and arrest Maduro falsely? Why are they talking about taking Cuba? South America is under attack financially, in terms of trade, things of that nature. Africa is under attack. China is under attack. Russia is under attack. What's really going on? Let us know what you think. Put your thoughts in the comments like I suggested, like I requested and asked. Let us know what you think. Until next time, you take care of yourselves and one another. You have been tapped in.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.